Hi, my name is Jason Elsgood. I'm a born and bred Aboriginal Territorian living on Larrakia country in Darwin in the Northern Territory. My company, Cross Cultural Consultants, have been working with the Northern Territory Seafood Council in the development of a cultural education and representation project aimed at fostering greater cross-cultural understanding within the fishing industry here in the Northern Territory. This is part 4 of a 6-part podcast series, and today we will talk about why it is important to understand the impacts of history specific to the communities in which we are working. This topic ties into the fact that Australia, as with many colonial countries, has a history of colonisation in which we see that we have brought many benefits to the people who we have colonised. However, the people who have been colonised see that they have been invaded and oppressed. This difference of opinion often leads to situations where the dominant culture has created an ethnocentric cultural view in which the only pathway to success is to become more like the dominant culture. This is not only the case for Aboriginal people here in Australia, but for Aboriginal people all over the world. There is, however, a growing voice among Aboriginal people the world over to be recognised for their uniqueness and their rights, which have been enshrined in the United Nations Declaration of Rights of Indigenous People, also known as the UNDRIP. This declaration has driven many of the legal decisions which have been made to recognise the rights of Aboriginal people internationally, as well as within Australia and the Torres Strait. Australia is a signatory to the UNDRIP, but not legally bound by its articles that it contains. In the instance of the Northern Territory seafood industry, it is a reclaiming of traditional held rights over land and sea country and economic activity that derives from those rights, which the parties who are negatively impacted by this decision, i.e. commercial and recreation fishermen, do not always recognise as being fair. The reality is that Indigenous people around the world have a voice in the UN and a growing voice nationally, which can't be ignored. As it can't be ignored, the parties involved must come together to develop a shared understanding and a shared history. Without working to understand each other's cultural drivers and worldviews and what influences these worldviews, then we cannot work together successfully. That's all for today's podcast. I would like to thank you all for listening. This has been part 4 of a 6-part podcast series for the Northern Territory Seafood Council's Cultural Education and Representation Project. To learn more, visit www.ntsc.com.au or check out the Northern Territory Seafood Council's Facebook page. This project has been delivered by Cross Cultural Consultants and the Northern Territory Seafood Council with funding from the Australian Government.